وبركاته. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور انفسنا ومن سيئات اعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sorry, I'm just muting a few more people. Jazakallah khair for joining us. This is a very important session that we're holding today. It's been a while, but I think it's time that we address certain things, especially given that the sessions are aimed at our boys, 11 plus. It's quite a hard-hitting topic, but it's an important topic, inshallah. Inshallah, you all benefit from this at the end of the session. We're expecting quite a few questions. I've raised a few questions with the Ustad, who I'll introduce shortly already. But as I mentioned just before everyone logged in, before we started, if you have any questions, please raise them. As direct as they may well be, it's an important topic, inshallah, especially for our kids living in this day and age, and we will answer them as best we can. The session may go over what we normally expect, but this very much depends on the number of questions that we get. As ever, please ensure that your microphones are turned off and your cameras are off. As I say, there'll be questions at the end. But if I can start, inshallah, by introducing our Ustad for today. You've not seen him before. Ustad Ibrahim Al Tamimi is a local individual that is well regarded in the community here in Wembley. He has a master's in chemical engineering from UCL and currently works as a process safety engineer in the oil and gas sector. Alhamdulillah, mashallah. And he's been doing that for the past 10 years. He is very much involved in the youth, particularly in this local area. And a few of you may well recognize him because he's involved quite actively in the Yasin Youth Tours Centre that we have here in Wembley. So he helps to organize such things as football, beach trips, camping, cottage holidays, and more. And also delivers khutbahs. I'm sure you've all seen him at the Friday the Jum'ahs that we have in the YYT, the Yasin Youth Centre, every week, alhamdulillah. As I say, he's currently a board member at Yasin Youth, where inshallah he hopes to facilitate various programs for our kids. As I say, taking them on trips and opening their eyes up to our deen and how we should conduct ourselves as Muslims and as young Muslims, inshallah. The Ustad will start now. I will turn off my camera and mute myself. Please all ensure that you're muted as well. And we'll raise these questions at the end. But as I say, if you have any questions, inshallah, please raise them and we will get to them at the end of the session. So Ustad, I'll turn off for now and let you take over, inshallah.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah, amma ba'd. So, Jazakallah khair for picking out this very, very important topic that we should try and understand and implement. Some things I'll say you may be shocking, but what you realize, you end up realizing is that Islam is actually making things easy and good for us. It's not making things difficult, it's making things easy and good for us. Firstly, the times that we're living in now, in the corona times, this has allowed people to focus on hygiene much more and realize the importance of personal hygiene and the importance of cleanliness. You know, we see all these adverts about make sure you wash your hands for at least 20 seconds. If you sneeze in your elbow and things like that. These are things that to improve a person's hygiene. But when a person looks at the religion of Islam and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he will see that in fact Islam looked at this and addressed this way earlier than all these people. And these are things that doing them is actually a rewarding action, not just because you are doing something that is good and makes you clean, but also because you are doing something that has been prescribed by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and therefore you will be rewarded for following the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There there is a very famous saying that cleanliness is from Iman. Some people say it's a hadith. There is no hadith with that exact wording that cleanliness is from Iman, but the understanding of the hadith is that cleanliness is from Iman, and there's the hadith that cleanliness is half of faith. We'll discuss that later on, inshallah. But we understand that from the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that cleanliness is from Iman, it's from belief, and from the things that a person needs to do, particularly the males. We can focus on this is applicable to both males and females, but let's just focus on the males. The things that a person needs to do. From these things, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said 5 actions of the actions of the fitrah, the actions of cleanliness and the actions of nature, natural things that a person should do. Whether they're Muslim or not, these are things that people usually do and people should do, and Islam is reminding us and telling us that we should look after these things. So from these things that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned is that a person, he must shave his pubic hair. This is something that Islam tells you to do. When a person grows old and they start growing this pubic hair, Islam is telling you to, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying you should shave that. The other thing that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the person should do is that they should pluck the armpits, the hair that grows there. Another thing is, from these 5 things, is that the person should do circumcision. Another thing is that they should cut or clip their nails. And the final thing is that a person should trim their moustache. So these are things that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned in the hadith. For us to look at these things in a little bit more detail, when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam extrapolated on these things, or when he explained them in a hadith, he said shaving a person's pubic hair and the plucking of the armpit hair, or shaving the armpit hair, it's all fine, should not be left for more than 40 days. So now we have a commandment from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's telling us you should do it, and he's telling us you should not leave it for more than 40 days. So it's very, very important for us to understand this, that if you have hair growing, you must be taking it off at least once every 40 days. And this 40 days is the maximum that you can allow it to grow. So make sure that if you want to follow the sunnah, as soon as you see it growing longer, then shave it and get rid of it. It's unsightly. It's unsightly. It's not something that is nice to look at. If you see someone sitting down and they lift their arm and you see all this armpit hair, it's not something that's nice to look at. And Islam is telling us it's commanding us to take this hair off, because it's part of hygiene, it's part of cleanliness. So doing so is a rewarding act. And in fact, when you hear the hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or you hear the Sahaba narrating them, many times that when they narrate that they saw the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was making dua and his hands were lifted, or when he was doing sujood and his hands were separated, his arms were open, they weren't really close to his shoulders or close to his body. The Sahaba said we saw the whiteness of his armpits. He was always shaving. He wouldn't have hair growing there because he would constantly shave it. So that's something to note. I said 40 days, and this is because there's a hadith that mentions 40 days, but it doesn't mean let it reach the 40 days and then shave it. No, it means as soon as it grows long, then get rid of it, then shave it. It may be once every week, once every 2 weeks, but make sure that this is something that you remove. And if you're neglectful, make sure you do not leave it go for beyond 40 days. So that's these 2 things. In terms of the hadith, also mentioned the trimming of the moustache. So this also is something that believers, Muslims should do, Muslim men should do, and whenever they have hair growing, when their hair starts to grow, and this is what the person should do is not allow the hair to go on top of their upper lip, because when it does, and then they start eating, and then that's the hair that mixes with the food, and it's unhygienic, it's unsightly when the hair starts to grow on your lips. And it's the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's something we need to be doing. And the trimming of the moustache, as well as the clipping of the nails, again, you shouldn't leave it for too long. But if you want to follow the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would do this every Friday. Every Friday, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would clip his nails, fingernails and toenails, and he would trim his moustache, making sure that it's not growing long. So when most of us here, I'm imagining, have reached the age where this hair is growing, that's something we need to focus on. And the fifth thing mentioned here, circumcision. I'm pretty sure all of you also have been circumcised when you were younger, and that's something, again, it's hygienic because it doesn't allow the urine to gather in that spot. Rather, it's more for it's better for cleanliness. So these are things, that specific things mentioned by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which we need to act upon, and they are good for hygiene. And these things that I mentioned, you will notice that these things are shared values between all humans. It's not something that just Muslims do. It's shared value between all humans. Circumcision, you'd say maybe some societies don't. Jews do that. A lot of Americans actually do circumcision. You find many communities they do that. But all the other actions, you see most mankind are will follow this, because these are basic hygiene things, and these are things that we understand that the Sharia came down to make it clear for us how we approach these things and how long we should let it grow, or when we should be cutting the hair and things like that. So that's something that's important. Another thing that's important with regards to hygiene that we need to look at in terms of cleanliness is the teeth, a person's teeth. And we think this is known. A person should look after their teeth, they should brush their teeth. But we see that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he emphasized this. He said, had it not been that he didn't want things to be difficult for us, he would have he would have commanded us to use the miswak before every salah. So at least 5 times a day using the miswak. That's how important it is for a person to maintain their oral hygiene, the hygiene of their mouth. So it's important for us to do this. Don't neglect brushing your teeth and think, oh, that's fine. There's something that you may not notice, but others will notice. Particularly if you can, it's also brushing your tongue. Even the hadith where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would be brushing his teeth, the Sahaba would narrate the hadith, and they say, and the Sahaba would say, and then I saw the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam using the miswak on his tongue, and he would be saying, oh, oh. That's the noise that he's making, because he's brushing his tongue, and he's like, oh. You see this noise that comes up. That's exactly what the Sahaba described the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam doing when he was brushing his tongue. So that's something we should focus on. Make sure that your mouth has a good smell. And in fact, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, if a person had eaten garlic or onions, then he should avoid the masjid. If he's eating garlic, he should avoid the masjid. Or anything that makes them have a bad smell, he should avoid the masjid, because when he speaks to people and when he opens his mouth, a foul smell will come out and he will be harming the people. So it's important for us to know that as part of Islam is to maintain these things. What's also important is body cleanliness, and this is something that we know, and in this society in particular, people do this a lot, but maybe sometimes, or maybe they speak about doing it a lot. I don't know if they do end up doing it, but having showers and having regular showers. A Muslim should at least once a week. Of course, you should try and do more than that. But the time where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where they had no running water, you need to fill up, and then have no shower. You take from a bucket, and you take in a bowl, and you put the water over your head. Even at those difficult times to find water, they still had at least once a week they would bathe. For us, we say that we take that as the bare minimum, but you should be doing that more often and making sure that the person is clean and beautifying themselves. When a Sahabi came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said, I like to dress in a good way. Is this making me, am I an arrogant person? And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said to him, Inna Allah jamilun yuhibbul jamal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beautiful and he likes beauty. So it's not from arrogance that a person dresses well, that a person is clean, that a person looks after himself. Rather, it is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves, for a person to look smart, to look good, to look clean. Don't neglect yourself. Even when you're at home and you've got your family with you, don't neglect your appearance. Another thing is combing your hair. When the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, once he saw a man and his hair was all dusty and messed up, he said, didn't this person find a comb to comb his hair? And when he saw a person whose clothes were dirty, he said, didn't this person find something to clean his clothes? So it's important for us to maintain these things. And these things that I've just mentioned now, they are things that you would think they're universal. They are things that all humans do. and I'm pretty sure all of us do, but it's important for us to know what Islam says about them and the criteria that Islam said in terms of the bare minimum that a person must adhere to. Anything above that is even better and is good for a person to be in that state. Now, I want to speak about the things that we think are probably not universal, in particular to the society and in the environment that we're living in now. Things that a person, we see others around us are not doing this, but it's important for us to make sure we maintain them because these things are important. And in fact, if you remember the poster for this event, it said cleanliness is half of faith. This is the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and many scholars said cleanliness here. Some said cleanliness here is referring to spiritual cleanliness. Some said cleanliness here is referring to wudu, that the person is in a state of wudu, and that's half of faith because it allows a person to pray and to read Salah and to pray, of course, and read the Quran. So it's very important for a person to maintain this cleanliness, this extra level of cleanliness that allows them to be able to pray. When the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he went past the grave, and he saw, and then he said, "There's two people here being punished in these graves, and they're not being punished for something that you people see as being major. One of them was spreading gossip, and the other one did not clean himself after the going to the toilet, or did not protect himself from the splashes of the urine when going to the toilet." You see that? You think it's something normal. He didn't clean himself, but why did he be punished in the grave for that? Such a severe punishment, because this person did not do something that allowed him to be. What this person did is that he did something that allowed him to be in a state which his salah is not acceptable. So it's very important for us to make sure that this second section that I'm going to discuss now, we focus on this, because this allows us to perform salah. Otherwise, our salah is not acceptable, and that's a reason for us to be punished by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this thing it's not something that we shy away from. How to go to the toilet and things like that, it's not something that we shy away from. It's something that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us. And the people of the past, they knew this, and in fact they wanted to mock the Muslims about this. And they said to Salman al-Farisi, a great Sahabi, they said to him, your Prophet told you everything, even he taught you how to go to the toilet, even he taught you how to defecate. That's the word that they used in a derogatory manner. So Salman al-Farisi said, yes, he did. He said he taught us how to do that. He taught us that when we go to the toilet, whether urine or defecation, then you shouldn't face the Qibla. If you're out in the open, you shouldn't face the Qibla or give your back to the Qibla. And if you are cleaning yourself after going to the toilet, you shouldn't use your right hand, and that you shouldn't use less than 3 pieces of dry material to clean yourself, and you shouldn't clean yourself with bones or something of the sort. So it's not something that we shy away from, and Salman al-Farisi is saying, yes, I'm proudly telling you that we've been taught how to go to the toilet. So it's important for us to actually know what the teachings were of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam when it comes to going to the toilet. So from these things, let's start right from the beginning. When a person goes to the toilet, and we'll start easy. When a person goes to urinate, to pee, what a person needs to do is that he needs to ensure, from the thing that he needs to do, is that nothing of the urine falls on his clothes. The hadith that we mentioned earlier, one of the narrations say, one of the understandings of the hadith is that the person, when he went to the toilet, sometimes the urine was splashed on his clothes. So that's something you need to make sure that you don't allow it to go on your clothes. Even right at the end, when there's finally a few drops coming out, making sure that does not touch any of your clothes. That's very important. And the other thing that we need to know is that you must clean yourself after going to the toilet. It's not sufficient to just go urinate and you think that's it. It's it. There's nothing more coming out. I can put my boxes, I can put my clothes back on. That's not sufficient. A person must clean himself after going. Even if he sees nothing, he must clean himself after going to the toilet, because if he doesn't, then he has not done the prerequisite that allows him to do wudu. You can't do wudu if you haven't cleaned yourself after going to the toilet. your wudu doesn't count, and therefore your salah doesn't count. So it's very important for us to focus on this. And that's why I'm saying here, this is something that may not be as universal, because in the society that we have today, people don't clean themselves after they go for a urine. They don't clean themselves. They use the urinal, they just open the zip, that's it, do the business, close the zip, and walk away as if nothing happened. And that is not what Muslims should do. The thing that I'm going to say here is, it's actually not haram. So it's okay if a person goes to the toilet standing up. That's what I'm saying. It might be shocking to hear. No, it's fine. In fact, when the Sahaba once from a distance, he saw the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam going to relieving himself whilst he was standing up. So that's not something that is forbidden. Some scholars say it's disliked to do, but it's not something that is forbidden. It's not something that's haram. But what the person needs to do, ensure, is that if he does so, he needs to make sure nothing splashes on him and nothing goes on his clothes. And after he does so, he must clean himself. And that's why that's why we understand from that you can't use the urinals, because once you finish from there, there's no toilet paper, there's no water, there's nothing to clean yourself afterwards. So even if you ensured nothing fell on your clothes and that's it, you haven't managed to clean yourself after that, and that's why it's not acceptable to use these facilities. Rather, you should go somewhere, and of course, you should hide your private parts. It's not permissible for anyone to look at it or for you to have it shown. So you should hide it, and therefore you can't use the urinals. You have to be using a cubicle, and making sure that you clean yourself after you do so. The way you clean yourself, as mentioned by the hadith, is use a dry piece of material. Back in the day, they never had toilet paper, so what they used to usually use was rocks. But we have toilet paper, so we can use toilet paper. And that's another thing which some people may not know, is that it's actually acceptable from an Islamic perspective to only use toilet paper after going to the toilet. It's not a must that you use water. That's not a must. You can use just toilet paper, but there are conditions for using toilet paper. That you must remove all the impurity from yourself. Whether you did the number 1 or number 2, you must remove it all from yourself, and you must use at least 3 different pieces. The hadith mentioned 3 different rocks, but we have toilet paper, so at least 3 different pieces of toilet paper. Even if from the first time you felt that you cleaned yourself, you should do it at least 2 more times. So at least 3 times, at least 3 different pieces of toilet paper, as well as ensuring all the najasa, all the impurity has been removed. Once you've done that, then that's okay. Then you are not required to use water. But if you do use water, then that is better, because water is more cleaner. It allows you to clean yourself better. It's a better way of doing it. But if you go somewhere and there is no water and there's only toilet paper, Islamically you're okay, as long as you have cleaned yourself, you've removed everything, and you've done it more than 3 times. You use at least 3 different pieces of toilet paper. But the best thing is to do a combination of both. Is that you use toilet paper and you use water. Doing both is the best thing. And in fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about people, and these are the people who used to live near Masjid Quba, Masjid al-Madinah, the first masjid to be built in Islam, not the Masjid Nabawi, another one, the Masjid Quba. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فِيهِ أُنَاسٌ يُحِبُّونَ يَتَطَهَّرُوا وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُطَهِّرِينَ. In it are people who like to purify themselves, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes those who purify themselves. So when people are asking why were those group of people specifically mentioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as those who like to purify themselves, because all the Muslims like to purify themselves, and the answer was that because those people, when they used to finish going to the toilet, they used to use water as well as a dry material. So they used to do a combination of both. So for our times, water and toilet paper, using a combination of both, that is a better way. And that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke highly of those people. So if you want to go for the best, that's the best way. Otherwise, just water or just toilet paper. But if you use just toilet paper, at least 3 times, and all the impurity needs to go. And that's the same goes for even if you're going to do a poo. If you're going to do defecate, do a number 2. Same thing. Again, no one should see you when you're doing that. And you must clean yourself until all the impurity there's nothing left on your body. And whether you use water or use just toilet paper, it's acceptable so long as you meet these conditions. so these are key things, and these are things that we need to know, understand in our daily lives. Whenever we go to the toilet, if you don't clean yourself after doing that, then you have committed something that is a major sin in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the hadith said that those people are being punished in their graves. And one of them was because he didn't clean himself after going to the toilet, after relieving himself. So not cleaning yourself after you relieve yourself is a major sin in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It may be a minor sin according to us, according to the society that we live in, but in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a major sin that is punishable in the grave. So make sure that you really take heed of this, and make sure you really act upon this and focus on this. If you think there's not going to be toilet paper, carry toilet paper with you wherever you go, or even better, carry an empty bottle with you wherever you go. So if you need to go to the toilet, fill it with water, and you can clean yourself if you've gone to the toilet. And the other thing that was mentioned in the hadith as well is that when you clean yourself, don't use your right hand. Use your left hand. Right hand is reserved for good actions, and left hand is reserved for cleaning actions and things that are not spiritually good or great actions, like shaking hands and things like that. You use your right hand, you reserve and eating, but you reserve your left hand for cleaning yourself and touching impurities and things like that. So that's in terms of cleaning yourself. Another thing that a person needs to do to clean themselves is wudu. And we all know how to perform wudu. This is something that is fine. And just a little bit off topic here. I just want to highlight two important things with regards to wudu that sometimes we slack it. And that is when we perform wudu, we are not performing it in the best manner possible. We're not performing it in the correct manner, because to do wudu, you need to, whenever a part needs to be washed, it needs to be fully washed. And what people sometimes do is when they clean themselves, their elbows are not clean. So you see them, they go and someone does this in the toilet, and that's it. And this area here is left dry. That is incorrect. If you go, make sure that you go all the way, completely wet that. You wash your complete face all the way there. You don't just that's it and that's that. No, you wash your complete face. And again, when it comes to your feet, making sure you're washing all of your feet, including your ankles and your heels. When the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was with some Sahaba, and they performed wudu, but they didn't clean their feet properly, their heels were dry. When he saw them, he said, "Woe to the heels from the hellfire! Woe to the heels from the fire!" So a person needs to make sure that even the heels are washed, and the whole part is washed properly, so that the wudu can be accepted. Otherwise, your wudu doesn't count. And even if you've gone to the toilet and you cleaned yourself properly after going to the toilet, if you don't do your wudu properly, then your salah is not acceptable. Everything revolves around your salah. That's a key act of worship that the person needs to make sure they have correct. So make sure that you have that correct, so you perform wudu properly. And the other thing with regards to wudu is sometimes people wipe over their socks. What we need to know is that when a person wipes over their socks, they must have put them socks on in a state of wudu. You can't wake up in the morning, put your socks on, and then go do wudu and wipe over your socks. That's not acceptable. For you to be able to wipe over your socks, you need to have performed proper wudu with washing your feet, and be in a state of wudu before going to the toilet, putting your socks on. And then next time you need to perform wudu, you can wipe over your socks. So that's a key thing to note. To be able to wipe over your socks, you must have put them on when you are in a state of wudu. And one more thing to mention in terms of cleanliness is, and this is something some of you may have reached this stage yet, some of you may haven't, but it's very important to know this, is that when a person reaches puberty, and that can happen from the ways that this happens, the person sees a wet dream. They see themselves doing something and they ejaculate. This is something that when a person does so, he has reached the stage of puberty. And when he has done so, because after that will happen many times afterwards. When a person does so, he must wash himself afterwards. He must have a full shower afterwards. It's not sufficient just to clean yourself, clean the area maybe that got dirty and think that's fine, I'm clean. No, you must perform ghusl It's Islamic. That's the Islamic word that's used. Ghusl, which is a full body wash. And you must ensure the water touches every single part of your body, even for those who have maybe long hair, making sure that the water touches your scalp. It's not like when you're doing wudu. When you're doing wudu, you just wet your hair. You don't have to get your whole hair wet. The water doesn't need to reach your scalp. But when you do ghusl, you must make sure that your whole scalp is wet. Everything in your hair, every part of your body, every outer part of your body is wet. That's how you perform ghusl. And after that, then you're okay, and then you can perform wudu, or you can just go straight and you can pray. You're in a state of wudu. So it's important to make sure you know this. And this is whether you ejaculate, whether you've been sleeping, or whether you do it somehow when you are awake. Even if you forget about all the Islamic rulings with regards to it, even from a natural perspective, or from a livelihood perspective, it causes addiction, it causes many problems, so it should be avoided. But if it does happen, then a person, what has happened is that he has ejaculated, and therefore they must do a full body wash. If they don't do a full body wash, they can't pray. Even if they do wudu 10 times, it's not sufficient. Even if they clean themselves so properly, but they haven't done a full body wash, a full ghusl, then they are not in a state of tahara, and therefore they need that their salah won't be accepted. And so these are the main things that I want to discuss. The first half was the in terms of general things, universal things that are that all people agree on in terms of cleanliness and hygiene, and the special things that us Muslims need to look into in particular, and make sure that we do these things, such as making sure we know how to clean ourselves in the correct manner, and how to purify ourselves, and being in a state of wudu and in a state of tahara in the correct manner, so that we can pray and that we can read the Quran. So that's all I wanted to speak about today in terms of my part, and there may be many questions here, so I think I can open up the floor for questions.
Jazakallah khair, inshallah. There are a number of questions. Really good reminder. And you'll see that the number of people that we have on here reflects that. We've got about 50 or so people who've joined us. So you've already talked about wet dreams. Can you just tell us a bit more about ghusl and what somebody has to do in order to ensure that the ghusl is performed properly? What are there certain steps?
So, I mean, to do the best way is what the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would do, is that when he would go, firstly, he would wash his private part. That's the part that's becoming that the event happened at, and then he would perform wudu, and then he would put water over his body and make sure that the water reaches all parts of his body, and that's it, and then he's done. That's how the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would do it. What a person should do, and the bare minimum is, and to ensure that you've completed the ghusl, is that every single outer part of your body has been washed with water. So water is freely flowing on it. So if you stand under a shower and then you perform, and then you make sure that all your parts of your outer body has been washed with water, that's fine. But the one that I want to focus on is, if you have long hair, you need to focus that the hair reaches the scalp. So the best way is how the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did it, but the bare minimum, what's acceptable, is all of your outer body has been washed with water.
Jazakallah khair. And then we've got a question about istinja. Can you explain what this is and when somebody has to do this?
Okay, istinja is the Arabic word that's used when cleaning yourself after going to the toilet. There's two words that's used in Arabic. One is istijmar and one is istinja. Istijmar is to clean yourself using a dry piece of material like toilet paper. Istinja is to clean yourself with water. So that's the two different things. And like we mentioned, both are acceptable, but the best is to use a combination of both. Or either of them is acceptable, and it's best to use a combination of both. So istinja is to clean yourself with water, and to do this, you don't have to have, as we had with cleaning with dry material or with toilet paper, that you must do it at least 3 times, even doing it once. But the water should remove all the impurity, all the urine, or all the defecation from your body, making sure it's fully been removed. That's all that's required.
Okay, inshallah. And sticking with the topic of istinja, is it a must that you have to do istinja after you wake up from sleep before doing wudu for Fajr or any Salah?
No, it's not a must to do that. It's a must to do that after going to the toilet. So if you've been asleep, that's fine. If a person releases wind, he doesn't need to do istinja, or he doesn't need to clean after that. That's fine. But after going to the toilet, you must do istinja. So you can wake up and you can go straight to washing yourself. In fact, there's a hadith where the Prophet Muhammad was asleep, and one of the Sahaba was with him in the room, his nephew or his cousin. And then when the Prophet Muhammad woke up and he had a thing that you hold water in, a sack that water is held in, and he opened that and he made wudu from that, and he started his salah. No istinja or anything else.
Okay, jazakallah khair. And then we've already talked about public toilets, and it's basically not permissible to use urinals. Somebody's asked here, if public toilets seats are soiled with urine, what is the best way to use such facilities? I know you said that it's disliked to stand up when going to number one. What is this, if somebody is faced with this when they use a public toilet at work or if they're out shopping, whatever, what should their approach be when it comes to situations like this?
I mean, there's a few things. There are wipes that people sell that you can find in the supermarkets, which you can carry with you, and they're called. The people who sometimes use them as well to clean themselves after going to the toilet. You can use them maybe to clean the seat if you want, and then you can sit on it. There are things that the people sell as well, a piece of material that you can put on top of the seat, and then you can sit on it, and therefore you haven't touched anything. You're just touching this piece of material that you bought. And there is the other option, which you can still do, is that you can go to the toilet, whether standing or just half sitting, and just making sure your body doesn't touch these impurities. So all are acceptable as long as you don't have anything that touches your body, whether it's from you or from something else. And if it does from your body, if it does reach your body, then it must be cleaned. You can't just wipe it with a tissue, it must be cleaned with water. That's the key thing. If it touches your body, it must be cleaned with water. Yes, we say after going to the toilet, you can clean yourself with tissue, but if it reaches an other area of your body, if urine reaches your thighs or your legs or anything else, you can't just wipe it with tissue, you must clean it with water. So that's the key thing to note.
Jazakallah khair. And just touching on that, if somebody's clothing gets soiled wholly or partially with urine, for example, they've used the public toilet, is it advisable to just simply wipe over with water, or would you advise, or is it advisable to change trousers or the clothing in total?
So if you know where the area was that has been soiled, then you can clean that, but cleaning it, wiping with water is not sufficient. It has to be cleaned. And when the scholars say cleaning it, it means you put water on it, it gets wet, and then you squeeze the water out. So it's not something simple of wiping. No, it needs to be actual cleaned. So that you can do. Or it's always much better to change your clothes. But if you can't change your clothes, then what's acceptable is that this material is cleaned, and it's not cleaned just by wiping. It's cleaned by wetting it, making sure the impurity has been removed, and squeezing the water out. If you don't know where it has gone on your clothes, then but you are sure it has gone on your clothes, then what you should do is you should change them, because you're sure that there is impurity on your clothes, but you're not sure that you've removed it. And therefore the Islamic principle is that uncertainty or certainty is not removed by doubt. The certainty that you have is that there is impurity on it, and the doubt that you have is, have I removed it or not? So you can't remove, but the certainty remains, and therefore until you wash this whole piece of clothing, you should not pray in it.
And this issue of doubt, some kids, when they get to that stage in their lives, they want to make sure that they've done absolutely everything that they possibly can, and sometimes it causes them to go to a particular extreme where they're consciously thinking, I've done it, but I don't think I have. I'm feeling something, but I'm not sure if I have. And it causes them to kind of stay in the bathroom for a lot longer than they should do. Waswas, basically, so whispers of shaitan. What can you recommend? What advice can you give these children of ours?
So, I mean, what a person should do is try to avoid just constantly thinking, have I cleaned it? Has something happened? Try to avoid it. All you do what a normal person would do. You'd go to the toilet. Once you've finished, you clean yourself, and then you walk away. And don't listen to what happens after that. You sit there for a minute or two. Maybe you could sit there for a minute after finishing, just ensuring that's it, everything has been released, cleaning yourself, and that's it. One of the Sahaba was asked about this and said, or either one of the Sahaba or one of the scholars, and this is actually mentioned in some of the books of fiqh, that a person, after going to the toilet for number one, he feels that either he didn't clean himself properly, or there is something else has come out, and he feels some wetness in his clothes. What does he do? So the scholar's reply was, when you go, you clean yourself and you make yourself very wet, and then you put your clothes on. And if you think that, oh, maybe I've released something, you say, no, this is the wetness from the water that I cleaned myself, and you ignore that doubt. If you haven't done that, and as soon as you feel wetness, you think, oh no, it must be urine. But if you make yourself wet, and then your clothes are a little bit more wet after that, whenever you feel wetness, soon afterwards, you think, no, it's not that I've had more urine, it's just the water after cleaning myself. So Islam is there to make things easy for us. Islam is not telling us things are so difficult. No, Islam is telling us things are easy. Look, just do something that allows you to forget that doubt. That's what Islam is essentially telling us.
Then we've got a couple of questions about passing wind. They've already addressed this. Somebody's asked, can you do wudu? I think, do you have to do wudu after you do a fart? And the answer is yes. Which is what you said. And then they asked, do you have to wash istinja after you do you do a fart? The answer is no. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So inshallah, that answers that question. And then somebody's asked a question directly to me saying, can you use tissue paper when you go to the toilet if there's no water? And the Ustad, and he'll confirm this, said yes, you can, as long as you use 3 separate pieces of toilet paper. So you can't use the same one over and over again. It has to be 3. And that is from the Sunnah, going back to what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Ashaba did. And then we have the question which I've just raised: if you have a medical condition, for example, urine leakage, what is the ruling on it?
Yeah, I think we're all young here, so we probably don't have this condition, but this is something that has been mentioned by the scholars. So what the person should do if they have this medical condition, is even the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam even spoke about this, is that what you do is that you perform wudu for every salah. So this person, maybe he thinks that he's urinating or anything like that. Firstly, he needs to put a barrier between him and his clothes, so that if some urine comes out, it doesn't go in his clothes. But the issue is, when he starts the salah, maybe some urine comes out, and then what does he do? Does he need to start salah again or not? So what the person should do is put a barrier between himself and his clothes, so that if anything comes out, nothing goes on his clothes. When he's about to do salah, he goes and he performs wudu. After performing wudu, he goes and he prays immediately afterwards. And then if urine does come out during his salah and he knows of it, there's nothing wrong with that. He continues his salah because that's his medical condition. He can't then continually keep on praying and praying and praying again and again and again and repeating it. No. What he needs to do, as per the hadith, is that he does wudu for every salah. For every salah, he does wudu. And then after that, he prays. And if something comes out during this period, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not like he does wudu and he prays 1 hour later. No, he does wudu immediately before the salah.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. And then a brother's asked me directly, Ustad, you can answer this. Is it permissible to touch your private parts to remove urine from it?
Yes, there are some ahadith which say you don't. It's a topic of discussion among the scholars, but most say it is okay to touch it, but not with your right hand. It should be with your left hand. But it's best to try not to touch it directly and use a tissue or use something else. But if you do happen to touch it, then there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, inshallah. And then we've got a question here. Some kids sometimes hold the need to go to the toilet in order not to break the wudu, especially when they come to salah. And you'll see them kind of bursting, but performing the salah sometimes very quickly in order to finish off and then go and use the toilet. What is your advice on this and kids who do this?
So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he spoke about this, and he said a person shouldn't approach Salah whilst he is holding off the two impurities, i.e. urine or defecation, i.e. poo or pee. He shouldn't go to the toilet while he is desperate, or while he's fighting these feelings. So when the scholars spoke about this, hey, this is not saying it's haram to do so, because you've done the obligation of Salah, but it's disliked to do so. Your Salah is acceptable, inshallah, but what you've done is you've done something disliked. Some say even you may be in some sin. Your Salah is acceptable because you've done the basics of Salah, but you've done something that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said not to do. So we shouldn't do that. We should always, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said don't do this, we shouldn't do it, and make sure that when we pray, we are praying in this calm and serene state, not trying to hold off going to the toilet. And in addition to that, from a health perspective, is not good. It's not good to hold it. It's from the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over us that we are able to relieve ourselves and go to the toilet. So for us to hold it in and maybe bring ourselves more illnesses, it's not good. In fact, when a person leaves the toilet, the recommended dua is to say ghufranak, which means I seek forgiveness in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A lot of the scholars have said why a person says this is because he is saying, I seek forgiveness in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because I can't thank him enough for the blessing of allowing me to relieve myself. If these things remained in my body, inside me, they would have harmed me, they would have made things so much difficult for me, and I can't thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enough for allowing me to relieve myself. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive me. So that's why it's important to know it's such a great blessing to be able to relieve yourself. So don't hold it in. From a health perspective, it's not good. From Islamic perspective, it's disliked, and the person shouldn't do it.
Does that apply? Of course, from a health perspective, you shouldn't hold it. But if you're out and about, for example, and there are no wudu facilities, does that advice change, or is it still the same?
First, I mean, like we mentioned, the person's salah is acceptable. So everyone has to judge for their own circumstances. If you feel that you going to the toilet means you will miss your salah and you'll not be able to perform the salah, then you will then you should see what's best. But you do realize that if you do happen to go and there is no water available, there is an Islamic ruling of tayammum if there is no water available. So Islam has made a way out for you. That's an option, but holding it in and praying, the salah, no one can say your salah is not acceptable. No, your salah is still acceptable. So it's every person needs to decide for their own and for their own circumstances what's best, but there is a way out for everything.
And Ustad, you've used an important word there, tayammum. Can you explain what this is, please, to everyone?
Yeah, so tayammum is what a person can do in lieu, so in place of wudu, if there is no water. If a person has no water, so he's out somewhere and there is no water around him, and he doesn't have the means to get water, whether buying it or going somewhere where there is water, it's very rare for us in our circumstances, but it can happen. Particularly if you go camping maybe or something like that, and there's no water, what a person can do is tayammum. And tayammum is very basic. It is you with your hands, you tap them on the earth, something from the earth. So before it would be dust or sand, or now you could just tap them on the grass or on the mud, something off the earth, and then you then the ayah, so you tap them and then you wipe your face with them and your hands, and that's it, just once, and that is tayammum. And you can do that, but when you do that, it's only applicable for that salah. So you do it even if you haven't gone to the toilet and you've done it for dhuhr and it comes to asr time, but you haven't found any more water. You can't say, oh, I haven't gone to the toilet, I've still got my tayammum. No, you need to do tayammum again for it.
Jazakallah khair. I've got a question. You raised the issue of plucking hair from under the armpits and removing hair from the pubic parts. Talking about the plucking of the hair, are you talking completely, and again with shaving from, removing from the private parts? Is that totally or shortening it so that it's not of a particular length?
So the hadith speak about what the hadith mentioned is a shave about the pubic part, and about the armpit, it's about plucking. So both actions involve removing it completely. So that's what a person should do, is that they should remove it completely. If they do shorten it, then I can't see it being haram, or that they've committed a sin if they constantly shorten it, but they haven't done what has been requested by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because the advice is to take it off completely. So if you shorten it, you're still doing the hygiene thing, which is good. You're not having long hair, but you've missed out on this great reward, and you missed out on following the sunnah of shaving this hair.
And is it when we're talking about the pubic parts, obviously we all understand where that is. Are there any other areas of the body that we need to ensure that there is no hair or very little hair to ensure that we are clean? For example, when we go to do a number 2.
Yeah. So the scholar said about the pubic hair. So that's the hair just above the private part and below it. And a lot of the scholars said even just near your backside as well is also considered as part of the pubic hair, according to some scholars. But both, regardless whether it's according to part of the pubic hair or not, it's something that should be removed, because this is when you go and clean yourself and there's a lot of hair there, it's not easy to clean. Rather, when it is being removed, it's so much easier to clean. So this is also something that you should do. Why? Because it makes cleaning yourself easier, and that's and it's good from a hygiene perspective. Even if let's just say we forget about Islam and all the Islamic rulings, it makes your life easier and it's better for hygiene. But what we can say is some scholars have actually said this actually falls under the understanding of pubic hair and it should be removed.
Is there, somebody's asked directly, is there any situation where sweat can be deemed to be impure, especially during the summer periods? For example, people are out and about, they're sweating profusely on their body. Is there a situation where that would cause them to be impure for the purpose of Salah?
So for the purpose of Salah, we can't, I'm not aware of any hadith that speak about this, but what we can say is sweating profusely means a person doesn't smell nice, he stinks, and he's not in a good way. And like the hadith which says, if you are have you had garlic, then you should avoid the masjid. If you have been sweating like that and you go to the masjid, you'll be stinking the people around you and harming the people around you, and therefore you should avoid that as well. If you have been in that situation, you should avoid that. And if you're at home, and then so you can then pray at home, and then if you go home, then you can clean yourself. So avoid mixing with the people and praying outside of the people if you have been in this situation, because this is something that harms them, and we have been advised, as per the hadith of the garlic, is not to harm the people. In fact, many scholars say one of the reasons why the Sahaba, or why it's recommended to perform ghusl on a Friday, is because some of the Sahaba would go to the masjid for Salatul Jumu'ah, and they're just in the middle of the heat, and they're all sweating, and it would be uncomfortable for the people. A lot of people stinking, so it was made a recommendation for them. Some scholars even say an obligation for them to clean themselves before going to Salatul Jumu'ah because of the sweating. It doesn't mean their Salah is invalid or it breaks their wudu, but it harms others, and we should not be harming others.
I'm conscious of your time. We've got about 4 more questions. Are you happy for me to raise them, or are you pressed for time?
I think we're going through the questions quite quickly, so if it's just 4 more, we can do that, inshallah.
Inshallah. Okay, so we've got somebody has asked, one more medical condition is when someone had surgery and is given a stomach bag permanently attached to the body. The person has no control, so poo constantly comes out. What is the ruling on this when it comes to being pure or purity?
So it would be more or less the same as the person who constantly has urine. So if this person should perform wudu before praying. Now this person has the additional problem is that he's praying and he has impurities connected to him. And when you pray, you should be clean and your clothes should be clean too. But this person has no other choice. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't burden a soul more than it can bear. And as per the ayah, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ, and fear Allah as much as you can. So that's the most that he can do. And by the will of Allah, his salah will be accepted if he performs wudu before every salah.
Jazakallah khair. Somebody else asked, if you're not 100% sure that your clothes are not clean, and there was a possibility that your clothes were splashed with urine, is it acceptable to miss your salah and pray qada replacements when returning home?
So if if you think that so certainty is not removed by doubt. That's Islamic principle. So if you are certain there was some impurity, but you're not sure where it is, then you must remove the impurity before praying. But if you're not sure whether the splash reached you or not, you don't even know if that was the case, then the certainty is that you are clean. So you should ignore that doubt that you think maybe there's some splash. If it's just a doubt, then you can ignore it. But either way, you don't delay your salah and then you pray it afterwards. The best approach would be is to pray your salah on time, and then just in case you can repeat it afterwards, but don't leave it out and say no, khalas, I'll pray later.
Then we're back on the topic of removing hair. Does it have to be using a blade, or can you use hair removal cream to remove hair from those areas?
Anything is acceptable. The hadith speaks about using a blade for the pubic hair and plucking for the armpits. I personally don't pluck my armpits. I probably find it too painful. I use a blade for that. So all is fine. If you want to do the best thing, that's the best thing. Blade for the pubic hair and the plucking of the armpits. But anything that removes the hair is fine. So using the cream is fine.
And you mentioned about making sure you don't keep hair for more than 40 days. Is it sinful if you inadvertently do this by mistake, if you leave it for more than 40 days?
So by mistake, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives people's mistakes. So if you do something by mistake, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive you, because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in a hadith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has overlooks what people do by error, or by forgetfulness, or what they have been forced to do. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will overlook it. If you do it purposefully, to be honest, I don't know if you are sinful or not. I'm not sure if this is something that is haram to leave more than 40 days, or if it's disliked to be left more than 40 days.
Jazakallah khair. And then we've had the same questions we asked about religious OCD, when kids need to do wudu over and over again, and it affects the quality of life. You've already talked about this, and just trying to push ahead and just ignoring these doubts that individuals have. And we've also talked about the correct way to perform ghusl that you've mentioned. So these questions have already been answered. Jazakallah khair. I don't think there are any other questions that have been raised. Alhamdulillah, it's a great session. Inshallah, you all benefited from it. I think it was very important to raise this, especially for the kids in this day and age. You know, when they go out to school, when they go shopping, when they're out and about with their friends. And we decided to talk about this because the Ustad gave a khutbah about this a few weeks back, and it's an important lesson. And inshallah, we can probably try and revisit it later on in next year or afterwards, after a few sessions. As ever, inshallah, keep an eye out on the WhatsApp message groups. Raise any questions that you have, or any particular topics that you want us to ask or raise, or have a particular Ustad talking about. We try and move away from the traditional khutbahs that are given and do practical things like these talks, alhamdulillah. So if you have any particular issues that you want us to raise, let us know, inshallah, and we'll do our best. Ustad, jazakallah khair for your time. Can I ask you to close the session with our closing dua, please?
Okay, jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair for all attending. Alhamdulillah, inshallah, we all benefited. I myself benefited as well. So with that, we finish. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal 'asri innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihat wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr. Jazakumullah khair.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.